You've heard I Want You Back. You've heard ABC. You've heard I'll Be There. But what you haven't heard are the songs Berry Gordy buried. Songs that sat in the Motown vault for decades. Songs that 5 brothers from Gary, Indiana poured their hearts into, and a man in a suit decided the world wasn't ready for. Some of these demos were too raw, some were too mature, some were too real, and one of them was handed to a different group entirely, and that group took it straight to #1. Tonight, we open the vault. 10 Jackson 5 demos Berry Gordy rejected before their brutal Motown exit. Number 10, Listen, I'll Tell You How, Bobby Taylor Sessions, 1969. It is the summer of 1969. The Jackson 5 have just signed with Motown. They're still kids from Gary, still wide-eyed, still full of fire. Their first producer isn't Berry Gordy. It isn't the corporation. It's Bobby Taylor, the same man who discovered them, who watched an 11-year-old Michael spin like James Brown at Chicago's Regal Theater in July of 1968 and refused to let the world miss it. Taylor brings the boys to Hollywood. He records them in their most natural element, soulful, raw, nothing manufactured. Listen, I'll Tell You How is one of those Bobby Taylor sessions. A tight, shuffling R&B groove with young Michael out front, pouring everything he has into every syllable. But here's where Gordy steps in. Berry Gordy hears the Bobby Taylor material and decides it's too adult, too gritty, too much old school soul for a group of teenagers. He wants something brighter, something that crosses over. He wants bubblegum and heartstrings, not the raw soul that Taylor heard in Chicago. So he pulls Taylor off the project, hands the reins to the corporation, his own in-house hit factory. And listen, I'll Tell You How gets sealed in the vault, not because it was bad, because it was too real. It didn't resurface until 2009, 40 years later, on the I Want You Back Unreleased Masters compilation. Number 9, Man's Temptation, written by Curtis Mayfield, Bobby Taylor Sessions, 1969. Now here is something that should stop you cold. Curtis Mayfield, one of the greatest songwriters who ever lived. The man behind People Get Ready, the man behind Move On Up. In 1969, Curtis Mayfield writes a song, and Bobby Taylor records it with the Jackson 5. The track is called Man's Temptation. Think about that for a second. A Curtis Mayfield composition, Michael Jackson on lead vocals, Bobby Taylor producing. That is not a demo. That is a masterpiece waiting to happen. But Gordy's machine doesn't run on outside writers unless it controls the publishing. The corporation writes the hits. The corporation gets the royalties. The corporation is Berry Gordy's creation. Just one man may be. An outside song from Curtis Mayfield? That doesn't fit the model, so the track gets buried. No single, no album placement. Just a 12-year-old Michael Jackson singing a Curtis Mayfield song into a microphone in a studio and nobody hearing it for 40 years. Temptation, yeah. It was finally released in 2009 on the same I Want You Back Unreleased Masters set. Number 8. That's How Love Is, The Corporation, circa 1970. The Corporation, Berry Gordy, Freddie Perrin, Deke Richards, Phonce Mizell. These 4 men wrote the soundtrack of your childhood. I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save, 4 consecutive number ones. No group in history had ever done that. And while they were hitting those highs, they were recording constantly, session after session, song after song. That's How Love Is a Corporation original. A full, finished, polished track. The same quality as anything that made it to radio. But it doesn't make the cut. Why? Because Gordy isn't trying to fill albums. He's trying to maintain momentum. Each single has to build on the last. Each album has to hit a specific tone. Anything that risks diluting the formula gets shelved. That's How Love Is sits in the vault, not for months, for decades.
It doesn't matter if you win or lose, it all turns out the same.
It finally comes out in 2009 as the lead single from Unreleased Masters, the first taste of what was waiting in that vault.
Sing it to me, sing it to me, sing it to me, sing it to me.
Rolling Stone covered its release. Fans who heard it were stunned. This was radio-ready material from 1970 that nobody had ever heard. Motown's original engineer Russ Tarana remixed it for release. It took 40 years for the world to hear it. Listen, 90% of you watching these videos right now ain't subscribed yet. If these stories are blowing your mind, imagine what you're missing. Hit subscribe, turn on that bell, and join the R&B fans who never miss a Groove Lens upload. Number 7, Love Comes in Different Flavors, The Corporation, circa 1969-1972. Here's a question that should bother you. If The Corporation was the greatest hit-making machine in pop history, and they were, how did a song they wrote for their most important group never make it out of the vault? Love Comes in Different Flavors is a Corporation original. Berry Gordy, Perrin, Mizell, Richards. The full team for the full group, and it still doesn't make the cut. That tells you something important about the Motown system. They weren't just making music, they were running a factory. And factories have inventory. Inventory that gets logged and forgotten. Songs that get made and shelved, not because they're bad, but because there were too many good ones.
Love comes in flavors.
Even one of Motown's own music critics, reviewing the track decades later after its release on the 2009 compilation, said, and I'm paraphrasing, the fact it was unreleased was probably justified. So even within the vault, there was a pecking order, and the Jackson 5 recorded so fast, so constantly that some songs just never got their turn. Number 6, Buttercup, written and produced by Stevie Wonder, 1974. Stop, just stop everything, because this one deserves its own moment.
So I took my chance on loving you.
Stevie Wonder is in the middle of his classic period. He has already given the world Superstition, Higher Ground, Living for the City. he decides he's going to write and produce an album for the Jackson 5. Not a single, a full album.
I have a right to my opinion.
The sessions happen. Stevie Wonder in the room, Michael Jackson at the microphone. Think about that combination. The two greatest musical minds of a generation in the same studio, working toward the same goal.
There's a chance for even losers.
But Berry Gordy shelves the album. The whole thing. Only one song from those sessions makes it out of the vault. And it doesn't happen until 2009, 35 years later. The song is called Buttercup. It was recorded during the Dancing Machine album sessions in 1974, intended for that album or the Stevie Wonder collaboration project, and quietly buried when Gordy decided against it. When fans finally heard it in 2009, the reaction was unanimous. This doesn't sound like a demo. This sounds like a Stevie Wonder record, because it is one. An entire Stevie Wonder produced Jackson 5 album. Gone, hidden, never released in their lifetime. Michael Jackson himself in the 1980s said he hoped that album would one day see the light of day. It never did. Number 5, If the Shoe Don't Fit, The Corporation, circa 1970-71. Now here is a song that critics heard for the first time in 2012 and immediately said this should have been a number 1. If the Shoe Don't Fit is a Corporation track. Recorded 1970 to 1971, Michael on lead vocals, all 5 brothers on the chorus. It is undeniable. NPR premiered it. Consequence of Sound covered it. Everyone who heard it asked the same question. How is this not on the radio in 1971? The answer comes back to the Motown system. The corporation was producing songs faster than albums could hold them. For every ABC and Love You Save that made the cut, there were 3 or 4 tracks that were just as strong, sitting in a filing cabinet in Detroit. Producer Deke Richards described Michael during those sessions as the most astonishing thing he had ever seen. He wrote in the liner notes, and this is a direct quote, "I've never seen anything like the night I saw Michael Jackson and his 4 brothers. Everyone knew they had witnessed something very special, something just short of a miracle." And yet, this is one of the songs that didn't make it. It sat in the vault for over 40 years before Motown finally released it on the Come and Get It, the Rare Pearls compilation in 2012. Number 4, I'll Try, You'll Try, Maybe We'll All Get By. Johnny Bristol, circa 1969-1974. Most people know Johnny Bristol as the man who made Hang On in There Baby. But before his solo career, Johnny Bristol was one of Motown's most trusted producers and writers. He co-produced some of Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell's biggest records. He co-wrote Diana Ross's final, supreme single, Someday We'll Be Together.
So I welcome sleep at the end of day.
And he wrote a track for the Jackson 5 called I'll Try, You'll Try, Maybe We'll All Get By. Now read that title again. Maybe We'll All Get By.
But now I find it's a form of slavery. People say you can hurt your back.
In the early 1970s, while the country was being torn apart, Vietnam, civil rights, poverty, Johnny Bristol was trying to put something meaningful into the mouths of 5 black brothers from Indiana, something that reached across the divide, something socially conscious.
I try, you try, maybe we're lost.
But Motown in 1970 and 1971 is not in the business of socially conscious Jackson 5 records. That's not the brand. The brand is Young Love. The brand is Bubblegum Soul. The brand is safe, so the track gets shelved. A potential moment of real weight in the voice of a 12-year-old Michael Jackson locked in a vault. It finally came out in 2009 on the Unreleased Masters compilation, 35 to 40 years after it was recorded. Number 3. Guess who's making whoopee with your girlfriend? The Corporation, circa 1970 to 71. All right, this one is not just a rejected demo. This one is a cover-up. In 1970, the Corporation writes a song. It's funky, it's groovy. It has a killer rhythm track. And the title, the original title, is Guess Who's Making Whoopee with Your Girlfriend? They record it with the Jackson 5. Michael sings it. The brothers harmonize. The track is finished. And then someone in that room looks at an 11-year-old Michael Jackson and says, "We cannot release this." According to Michael Jackson biographer J. Randy Taraborelli, producer Deke Richards made the call. Change the title, change the lyrics, preserve the image. So the track gets recut, new vocals laid over the original groove. The title becomes Mama's Pearl. The lyrics cleaned up entirely, and Mama's Pearl goes to number 2 on the Hot 100, only kept off the top spot by the Osmonds. The irony of that will make sense in about 30 seconds. But here's what people didn't know for decades. The original demo still existed in the Motown vault, complete, with the original raunchy title intact, with the producers' voices still audible in the background on the tape. It was finally released in 2012 on Come and Get It, The Rare Pearls. And when a New York radio station played the original demo, the DJ said, "I thought they were making a joke." Then they played it. I was floored. The original groove is funkier than the version we all know. Number 2, Never Can Say Goodbye, written by Clifton Davis, almost rejected 1970.
Never can say.
This one almost didn't make it for a different reason. Not because it wasn't good enough, because it was too good, too complex, too emotionally heavy for a group of children.
Even though the pain and heartache seems to follow me.
The year is 1970. A young actor and songwriter named Clifton Davis is working out of Motown's California offices. He's 25 years old. He has written a song that means everything to him personally. A song about a relationship that won't end even when it should. He's writing it in a room adjacent to producer Hal Davis, and Hal hears it through thin walls. He knocks on the door. He says, "Give me that song. I'm cutting it with the Jackson 5. Clifton Davis is worried. He tells the story himself. Michael Jackson asks him, "What does anguish mean?" The lyric reads, "There's that same unhappy feeling. There's that anguish. There's that doubt." And Michael Jackson is 12 years old. Clifton explains what anguish means. Michael shrugs and sings the line.
I'm never gonna say goodbye.
Hal Davis's assistant, Susie Ikeda, watches from the booth. She says, when he sang that line, he surprised us all with the feeling he put into it.
Don't wanna let you go. I never.
But here's the problem. Motown's marketing staff doesn't want it released. They say it's too mature for the Jackson 5. Too adult, too heavy. So how does it get out?
I never could say goodbye.
Producer Hal Davis plays his reference copy just a little too loud. His office is next to Berry Gordy's office. Gordy hears it through the wall. He overrules his entire marketing staff. Never Can Say Goodbye goes to number 1 on the R&B chart. Becomes the Jackson 5's 5th number 1. Isaac Hayes covers it immediately. Gloria Gaynor covers it in 1974. The Communards in 1987. And after the record hit, Michael Jackson and his brothers went on tour. 45 cities that summer, then 50 more. A number 1 record that almost didn't exist, saved by thin walls and a producer who played his stereo too loud. Number 1, One Bad Apple, written by George Jackson, rejected by Berry Gordy, 1970. And here it is, the number 1 rejected Jackson 5 song. And this one doesn't just sit in a vault. This one goes to number 1 for another group. The Jackson 5 have just ended their historic run. 4 consecutive number 1s. Nothing like it in history. And a songwriter named George Jackson, no relation to the family, writes a song specifically for them. It sounds like an ABC follow-up. Bright, joyous, a little electric. Puppy love energy with a monster hook.
I can make you happy, baby, satisfy you too.
He brings it to Motown. He brings it directly to Berry Gordy, and Gordy turns it down. Here's the reason Michael Jackson himself gave. Years later, in his own words, did you know that record was ours at first? But Motown turned it down. George's song was good, but too easygoing. We were striving for something much stronger, so the song goes elsewhere. It lands at Fame Studios in Muscle Shoals, Alabama. Rick Hall, the producer, has just signed a new group to MGM Records. A group of white Mormon brothers from Ogden, Utah, who had been doing barbershop on the Andy Williams Show until the Jackson 5 happened. Rick Hall tells his songwriter, write them a Jackson 5 song. The Osmonds record One Bad Apple in the style of the Jackson 5. With a 13-year-old named Donny Osmond on lead vocals, produced to sound as close to Michael Jackson as humanly possible. And One Bad Apple goes to number 1. It stays there for 5 weeks. Now here's what makes this brutal. At the exact same moment, One Bad Apple is sitting at number 1, the Jackson 5 release Mama's Pearl. And Mama's Pearl peaks at number 2, held off the top spot by the Osmonds, singing a song that was written for the Jackson 5. It's been reported that Berry Gordy allegedly sent a telegram to Fame Studios. 3 words, not repeatable here, but the message was clear.
You've been great. We love you. Good night.
And that feeling, watching a song that was meant for you go to number 1 for someone else, stayed with the Jackson 5. It was one of the wounds that never fully healed.
Don't wanna hold much, girl.
5 years later, in 1975, they walked out of Motown. Gordy kept the name. Gordy kept the masters. Jermaine stayed behind because he had married Gordy's daughter. But Michael, Jackie, Tito, and Marlon walked out into the world with their dignity, their talent, and the knowledge that the best years were still ahead. The first album they made after leaving, called Destiny, was almost entirely self-written and self-produced. It was everything Berry Gordy never allowed them to be. And the song that started all of this, the song George Jackson brought to Motown. Good night! 10 songs, 10 stories, decades of music locked behind the decisions of one man. And here's the thing about Berry Gordy. He wasn't a villain. He built something extraordinary, the most successful black-owned business in American history at the time. He turned an $800 loan into a dynasty, but the factory had a cost. The Jackson 5 were the last superstars Motown ever produced. Gordy said it himself. After they left, the label went quiet for 15 years, until Boyz II Men came along in the 1990s. The vault still has music in it, 40+ years after those sessions ended. Songs the world may never hear. But the ones we've found, Buttercup, That's How Love Is, If the Shoe Don't Fit, Man's Temptation, Guess Who's Making Whoopee, they prove one thing beyond any doubt. 5 brothers from Gary, Indiana were never the product of a machine. The machine just got lucky. They walked through its doors.